Hey, Tony. It is Thursday, and first off, to answer your question of the week, we're doing all right. Been busy few weeks, but we're doing okay. And now for my video, which is going to be, I'm not gonna say it's going to be a long one, but it's going to be one that I have some very, very real questions for you, Tony, because I think you said something completely wrong. Completely wrong. So what you said is that you didn't necessarily think the characters of Watchmen are anti-heroes. And I think you are expressly wrong. They were written specifically to be anti-heroes. That's what Alan Moore has said, and the fact that people consider Rorschach a hero has made Alan Moore, the writer of the comics, come out and say, then Watchmen failed as literature. So what I want to talk about right now is what exactly is an anti-hero? So this is from Wikipedia. This is what the description is, or what the definition is. An anti-hero or anti-heroine is a main character in a story who lacks conventional heroic qualities and attributes such as idealism, courage, and morality. Although anti-heroes may sometimes perform actions that are morally correct, it is not always for the right reasons, often acting primarily out of self-interest or in ways that defy conventional ethical codes. So that's a long definition. So I'm going to kind of break that down a little bit, particularly with the characters of Watchmen and why they are anti-heroes and not heroes. The first one, most obvious one, is Rorschach. Rorschach is the poster child of Watchmen between him and Dr. Manhattan, and Rorschach is a psychopath, truly a psychopath. And the reason why I say he is particularly an anti-hero is because his morality is so bonkers. It is so absolute and black and white that there is no room for any wiggle room in which you're either a good person or you're a criminal who deserves death. You kind of see this within Watchmen. I don't think you've read the graphic novel, and they do it differently in the movie. I definitely recommend reading the graphic novel over the movie. The movie's fine, but the graphic novel is just infinitely better. So the big thing that you kind of see that with Rorschach, in which his moral absolutism leads him to kill many people. And what Alan Moore had tried to do with Rorschach in particular was they wanted to okay, if Batman was real, we'd think him to be a psychopath because it's true. And Rorschach in this situation represents that reality because his moral absolutism led him to kill people who he considered not even worth saving, which is kind of interesting with his character because he himself is a crazy mass murderer. So in his same morally absolute sense, he himself would basically need to be killed by himself. Now I'm going to go into Dr. Manhattan, who's really the other poster child of Watchmen. Dr. Manhattan is also an anti-hero because he lacks any sense of care. He has seen everything in the future. He's seen sorry about that. He has seen everything in the past, and he just doesn't care. He's like, why do I care about saving these people? Because this is what's going to happen anyway. I'm just seeing time take place. And you see that particularly in the Vietnam sequences, in which Dr. Manhattan could have easily stopped the comedian from shooting and killing that Vietnamese woman, but he didn't because he just didn't care. Which is why we need to get to the comedian. The comedian is absolutely really another one of the textbook definitions of an anti-hero. He's the closest thing to a Punisher I would honestly say in Watchmen, because he is a terrible person, objectively a terrible person. He is a rapist, he is a murderer, and he's so cynical that he just doesn't care. He doesn't have any heroic qualities in that sense because what does it matter to him? He's there to do a job. He might claim to be a great patriot, but when you see the movie, he shoots JFK. So, not much you can do on that. Which leads you to some of the other characters who you could argue are a little more heroic, but I again would argue that they're just not. You have Silk Spectre. Now, Silk Spectre is an interesting character that I don't really think I don't really think the movie did her justice. She's great in the book, in the graphic novel, and she's fantastic in the show. If you get the chance, you gotta watch the Watchmen show. It's so good. But Silk Spectre kind of goes into the same regard of she's not necessarily a hero for good reasons. She's kind of a thrill hero because her mom forced her to be. And then, as you see later throughout the movie and later throughout the graphic novel, she ends up becoming more of a hero because it's what she wants to do to kind of be a rebel. And I would call her her and Night Owl are probably the two closest people you could call to like heroes per se. Like they actually kind of have a code. They kind of have heroic traits, but they're not necessarily in their own way. Again, Silk Spectre is kind of, she doesn't really like a lot of people. She kind of becomes a side character to her own story because of what her mom made her to be. And she kind of represents the hero who is only a hero because she was forced to be and doesn't want to be and doesn't necessarily act in those heroic senses. And then Night Owl too. So Night Owl is one of my favorite characters. I think specifically Night Owl too, because I think he represents the closest thing Watchmen has to a hero. But even still, he's not. He is somebody who, he is impotent. He is older. He doesn't necessarily care about the world around him in the same way that some of the others do. He did when he was younger until he just became disillusioned by all of it, which is why when you actually, no, I have not played Watchmen The End Is Nigh, but if you know the story of it, that was one of like Night Owl's big twists was in the story of The End Is Nigh. He fell in love with a villain essentially, and when him and Rorschach took her down, it kind of broke him a little bit inside, and that's why you see like he's impotent. He can't necessarily have the sexual relationship with Silk Spectre that she initially wants until he gets his blood going and actually committing what we would see as crimes for violating the Keene Act by her and him breaking Rorschach out of prison, which is absolutely not a heroic thing to do, because Rorschach is, by all intents and purposes, should be someone in prison. And then let's get to Ozzie Mendius. Ozzie Mendius is almost, he is the antagonist of the story, but I would almost, in a weird way, consider him one of the biggest heroes in it. Only because the actions that, like, he's actually, he's still very much an anti-hero, because for him, it's a situation of the end justifies the means. So the end, for his case, is world peace. And he achieves that. He stops the world from going into nuclear annihilation. He just does it by committing mass genocide and mass extermination and killing off supers, killing off people who stand in his way, and then killing millions of people. Millions of people with his, I mean, depending on which, if you go with the graphic novel with the giant alien squid monster, and if you're going with the movie, I'm not going to spoil the movie because you're still watching it, but the way the movie is also interesting. And for him, it's a situation of like, that end of world peace, he's willing to do anything for it, and he accomplishes it. So in a way, like, you look at him like, okay, yeah, you were very clearly the villain of this story. When you look kind of a deeper look at it, I'm not necessarily convinced he is. He is the antagonist, and he is absolutely an anti-hero. But what he does ends up being good for all of humanity. Now, there's a lot of moral discussions you can bring up through Watchmen, which is part of the reason why it's survived as an item of literature for 40 years now. But it's something that I feel people don't necessarily take the same look at that they should, because these are all deeply flawed people who claim to try and be heroes, but in reality they're really not. They're just people with dreams, people who like think they're doing what they can for the world, and it brings you to a discussion of, is Watchmen the perfect American dream? Because all these people are doing whatever their dreams want. And I think Comedian says it best, in which Night Owl just goes, what happened to us? What happened to the American dream? And Comedian just looks straight at Night Owl and just says, what are you talking about? It came true. So Tony, my question for you, does this make you rethink any of your beliefs about the characters of Watchmen? Tony, I'll talk to you here in a little bit, but I'll see you on Tuesday. Later, bro.